Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But a new month begins today. It's the 1st of February 2024. But our first story concerns the atrocities that continue, whether it be the 1st or the 30th of any month. Since the 7th of October, the people are being mercilessly killed, butchered, maimed, put in a despicable situation with no water, no food, no medicine, despite the fact that there are talks of a truce deal between Israel and Palestine. There are varying accounts of what Israel wants and what Palestine want out of this deal. Will both of them agree or not is another question whatsoever. The US has also destroyed 10 Houthi attack drones, a control station in Yemen. This has been said by the US military. Are there wider repercussions of this current conflict beyond Palestine is also something that we will be highlighting in this segment also. The United Nations Security Council did meet yesterday over the decision by the ICJ ordering Israel to prevent acts of genocide in besieged Gaza. Any update? We haven't heard any, but the fact is that people are still talking about it. Speaking of the ICJ, there has been a report by one of the human rights groups in Palestine that says that a mass grave has been found in Palestine where the people had been blindfolded and their hands cuffed and then they were thrown in a garbage bin after being killed. So this is again proof of what ICJ has been saying, that Israel needs to stop what it has been doing, and that is part of the genocide campaign. This and more will be part of our first story. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, is a very important I wouldn't say development, but an important aspect of our social values. Now, the social media has been impacting children and teenagers across the world, whether it be Pakistan, whether it be the United States. But in the United States, what has happened is that the US senators have called out CEOs of different social media organizations like Meta, like X, like TikTok, like Discord and Snap, over the dangers that children and teenagers face on social media platforms, whether it be bullying, whether it be the threats of suicide that have increased because of the social media impacts, whether it be the way the dark web is being used to lure in young boys and girls into acts that are far from, that can be called despicable to say the least. Also, the senators are asking to the heads of all these social media organizations to do more, to do much more that they are doing. They say that the hypocrisy by the CEOs of the social media companies is mind-boggling. This is a major lawsuit brought out by about 40 states jointly suing Meta, that owns Facebook, that owns Instagram, over alleged failures with children. This is going to be our second story, and that also will be highlighting the Pakistani aspect of it all, social disintegration and family values disintegration as well. Thirdly, we'll be talking about the ICJ. Of course, we will be highlighting the aspect as far as Palestine and Israel is concerned, but in this part we'll be highlighting one of the petition that was put forward by Ukraine against Russia. Now, judges at the top UN court on Wednesday found that Russia did violate elements of a UN anti-terrorism treaty, but did not. But this ICJ declined to rule on allegations that had been brought by Kiev that Moscow was reasonable for the shooting down of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. We all remember that incident when it happened over eastern Ukraine in 2014. The ICJ has also found that Russia had breached an anti-discrimination treaty by failing to support Ukrainian language education in Crimea after its 2014 annexation of the peninsula. We will be highlighting what both the sides think of this result, this judgment that has come out from the ICJ. Finally, we'll be talking about a portrait that has been found after 100 years. The portrait of Fräulein Leiser was one of the last works of Austrian painter Gustav Klimt. It could be now apparently sold for around $86 million at an auction. And of course, we'll be telling you how it was found and where it was all these last years. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns day 118 of the conflict, of the war, of the genocide that is happening in Palestine as we speak. We've been joined by Air Commodore retired Basit Abbasi in the studios to discuss the recent aspects of this. Thank you very much, Air Commodore Sahab, to have joined us. Air Commodore Sahab, I'd like to begin with what is happening in the United States. On the one hand, we see statements coming from the US saying that they want a ceasefire, that they don't want civilians to be killed. But on the other hand, we also see a very strong support for Israel on many fronts. Now, some 70 US cities, 70, including Chicago and Seattle, have passed resolutions on the Israel-Gaza war that are calling for a ceasefire and are putting more pressure on President Joe Biden to help end the fighting. The White House also, I'll quote what the US National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said, is looking into an extended pause in fighting longer than what we saw in November. A, will a ceasefire happen? B, when a ceasefire does happen, what kind of ceasefire will it be?
In my opinion, America is fully at the beck and call of Israel. And unfortunately, we have a president in the United States who is a known supporter of Israel, a die-hard supporter. He was elected a senator at the age of 29, and for 36 years he kept on being elected a senator. And then he became the vice president. So he has been in Washington, D.C., and he has had developed very close contact with the Israeli leaders, starting from Golda Meir, the first woman prime minister of Israel. So this is very unfortunate that although the public opinion, there has been mass demonstrations, and now, as you rightly pointed out, a very potent, so many states have passed these resolutions demanding that the war in Gaza should stop. But still, the American stance has not shifted from, they are still not talking of ceasefire, they are talking of pause, and they want the pause to be prolonged. This is perhaps a diplomatic sort of maneuver to sort of lure the parties into agreeing to it and then extending it indefinitely. This I say because everybody, Israel and its supporters led by United States, are under pressure from their own domestic constituencies. And Israel, the USA, the presidential election is in the offing now, and I am very sure that President Biden, if he doesn't change his stance, if the US policy doesn't drastically shift, which I don't see any movement in that direction so far, then definitely it will affect their election the campaigns.
All right.
And but as far as the situation in Gaza is concerned, we have just seen that Israel just sort of after the ICJ's ruling, Israel just made an allegation the very next day, when the public opinion, the Western opinion was actually shifting towards the judgment of the ICJ, and they were starting to think that yes, something drastic has been happening and should stop. That very moment, Israel puts up an allegation that the UNRWA was behind the attack on 7th October.
12 people within UNRWA.
Yes. And look at the strange behavior of the international diplomats. They stop funding. I mean,
you know what I fail to also understand, Commodore Saab, is why for 3 months they did not know that or did not understand. All of a sudden, just when the ICJ ruling comes, they come out with a new agenda. This
is actually just to press the Palestinians from every possible corner. They don't want to leave even the slight of, this is like John Floyd, on whose neck that policeman kept his knee for 9 minutes, and he kept on slowly dying. This is what they are trying to do to the Palestinians. That this was the only source of some sort of succor for
entering Palestine.
Yes, and they blocked it also. At one hand, they say that we want that the aid should follow. This is their stance, that war should continue and Israel has a right to defend itself and take revenge of the 7th October. But at the same time, because they are the champions of human rights, the self-styled pronounced champions of world, so they say that aid should also keep following. And on the other hand, the only agency which could provide them some succor, they block its funding. And I lament the behavior of the Muslim countries. All those countries, those 9, they are all Western countries, USA, Germany, Norway, I mean, those are the ones who are funding it. If they took this measure, this draconian, this, I mean, what should I say, measure, why couldn't some of those rich Muslim countries could stand up and say that I will foot the bill now if you are not ready for it?
All right. There are some countries that have said they will help or they will send aid. Canada, for example, that has stopped funding UNRWA, has said it is going to send aid through a parallel mechanism. I don't know whether that happens or not, is something else to see. I'd like to understand another report that has come from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development that says that the conflict has precipitated a 24% contraction in the GDP of Gaza and a 26.1 drop in GDP per capita in all of 2023. They say Gaza could restore its pre-conflict situation or the way it was working before the conflict began on the 7th of October only until the year 2092. 2092 is the end of the century, you know. So this is just to give you an example on how much of destruction has happened within Gaza, that it will take around say 70 years for Gaza to rebuild itself. Has this been the intention all along? Does the world realize the amount of destruction Israel has done to Gaza and continues to?
I feel that the world powers, whoever they are in cohort with Israel, they want somehow or the other to eliminate the Palestinians, which they cannot, but they are trying. And the problem is that if you look at I'll just come to that point. If you look at the Abraham Accord, what they are trying is to patch up things between Israel and all the Arab states and eliminate Palestinians. This is what they have been trying. And if this conflict had not taken place, probably some very leading Muslim countries might have recognized Israel. And so they want to sort of either eliminate Palestinians, and if they are not successful, which Israel is actually practically trying to do it, and if they cannot do it, they want to sort of marginalize them to such an extent that they should just be left helpless and begging for their survival.
You know, if you remember, Commodore Saab, in the very beginning when Israel started to enter Palestinian territories, Israel was just a small enclave, yes, and all the rest was Palestine. If you now look in 2023, Palestine has become a small enclave, and all the rest has become Israel. And this is what ultimately what Israel wants to do. But coming back to the destruction caused, and the year 2092 that is projected by the United Nations, doesn't it raise alarm bells amongst the so-called important countries of the world?
I think the term international diplomacy, it should be rebranded. It should be called international duplicity, international demagoguery, or something like that, because it's all just lip service. Things that people talk of human rights, they talk of human values, and look at what they are doing. The United States is not only supporting Israel, they are enabling Israel to do all this. You know, supporting is something else, and enabling, I mean, giving them the wherewithal to do it. Whose weapons they are using, Israelis? Who is providing this ammunition and the money for them to sort of wage such kind of war? Israel is not too big an economy. With that population, they couldn't afford such kind of a war. And if you see the period of previous war, they were very short-lived, very few days. And this has gone on for
more than 3 months
4 months now. It's about to complete 4 months.
We are 118th day.
Yes.
In 3 or 4 days, it will be 4 months.
So it's only because this is a plan on which all these nations are party to it. At least their governments are party to it.
Okay.
I see the sort of masses sort of rising against it. And there have been sort of demonstrations in Washington DC, and people have put a bloodied picture of the American president with dolls around it representing the Israeli children and the people who have died there. So this is a very clear visual to realize what is the sentiment of the masses. If not the whole mass of at least a big segment.
Is this going to change world politics or the politics of the global north, the way the global north has handled this conflict in the coming, say, decade? Do you feel a change will come for the better as far as the politics of these very nations is concerned, or do you feel that the governments that wield power in these countries will continue to do whatever they want?
For the time they are having a field day. I mean, they are at liberty to do whatever, and they don't seem to be sort of any inkling on their part to sort of go for some rational thinking. They want to support Israel for whatever it wants to intend, and both financially, militarily, and diplomatically. The United States has been using its vetoes for all the resolutions which were raised in Security Council to stop this war. It's the United States which vetoed them. So this doesn't seem to be changing, because if you see the major countries, UK, both the sitting Prime Minister and the one waiting in the line, the Labour Party leader, they both are, I mean, ardent supporters of Israel. And again, here on the United States front, the two leading front runners, President Biden and Mr. Trump, they are both supporters of Israel. Mr. Trump actually started this Abraham Accord, and for Biden it was something which is his heartfelt desire. He has changed many things that Trump tried to do, but he has not changed this. Not only changed this, he has accelerated the process. And do you know, there is a man, I am forgetting his name, but it's a designation, something to do with Middle East, some advisor. And that advisor to Middle East has one very important task, to sort of very quickly extend the Abraham Accord to Saudi Arabia. And number two, all the foreign policy initiatives. It's not the State Department which is taking the initiative in this as far as the Gaza is concerned. It's that gentleman who is a hand-picked man of Mr. Biden. And if you see I have read the history of President Biden, and you find that as a child, his father actually sensitized him to the Holocaust, so-called. And he sort of, from the childhood, he was sort of had emotional attachment towards what happened to the Jews.
No, there's one thing to have an emotional attachment. There's another thing to, openly side with the perpetrators of violence, of genocide. I want to understand also something else. We've talked about the food not entering properly into Palestine. Even the United Nations Relief Chief Martin Griffiths has told the United Nations Security Council that aid to Gaza continues to be blocked. On the other hand, the hospitals, whether it be the Al-Shifa hospital, whether it be the Al-Amal hospital in Khan Yunus, Nasir they are not only under Israeli siege, but also under heavy Israeli fire. There is no food, there is no water, there is no medicine, and there is no even way to treat those who are sick because the hospitals are being bombarded. Is this the ultimate, end game or game plan of Israel to eliminate Palestinians from history, from the land that they call their own?
There is a very old saying, those who live by sword also perish by sword. So this is what they want to do, and more so Mr. Netanyahu, whose neck is involved in all this. And as you know, there is voices they are rising from Israel against this. But he has to cling to the power, because there are serious charges against him. And the moment he steps out of the office of Prime Minister, he will perhaps be heading towards jail, because there are serious offenses.
So that is why he is clinging over to all the power he can through this conflict, so that he can avoid being indicted.
That is why he sort of decided to sit with the most extremist element in Israeli society. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come into the power, because they are just a matter of a few seats. And if this extremist party, had not supported Mr. Netanyahu, he wouldn't have been in power. So he knows that those extremist elements will only support if he keeps doing this.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you so very much, Commander retired Basit Abbasi, senior analyst, to have joined us. We are day 118. We have discussed this conflict many a times before, and there's a helplessness. We can highlight as much as we want, as much as we can, but until and unless the powers that be in the global north don't take the initiative to A, to stop Israel from continuing these barbarities, and B, to come not only to a ceasefire, but to some kind of a solution for the people of Palestine, so that they can, live their future in an atmosphere that we can call the least calm or an enabling environment for them, their future generations. For the moment, their future generations have completely been destroyed. The number of children who've been killed, the number of children who've been emancipated one way or the other, they have lost limbs, they are not in a state to continue, they are starving, there's a huge risk of famine. I mean, I can go on and on, Commander Asad, but the fact is, this is desperation amongst people like us who understand what the true value of humanity is, but unfortunately there are others who don't understand that true value. Thank you very much anyway, sir, to have joined us, to have talked to us about day 118 of this conflict. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the social media and the impact that it has on young minds, on teenagers. Now, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and the chief executives of the social media platforms TikTok, X, otherwise known as Twitter, Discord and Snap are being grilled by US lawmakers over the dangers that children and teens face on social media platforms. Now, one of the senators fumed while talking to Mark Zuckerberg. He said, "You have blood on your hands." Singling out Meta, the senators have pointed to internal company documents that show that Mark Zuckerberg declined to strengthen the teams devoted to tracking online dangers to teenagers. "This hypocrisy is mind-boggling," said Senator Richard Blumenthal. And of course, all of this is part of a huge document that is that forms part of a major lawsuit that has been brought by over 40 states jointly suing Meta over alleged failures with children. This is, of course, a very serious allegation, but an allegation that we have known for quite some time. To highlight different aspects of it, not only generally around the world, but also in Pakistan, we've been joined by Asad Baig. He's a director for Media Matters for Democracy that works exactly in this very domain. Thank you very much, Asad Baig, to have joined us. Asad, this is right up your alley, so I think you're the best person to answer this question. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg gives a public apology in the US Congress as hostile lawmakers grill the chiefs of social media companies such as X, such as Meta, such as TikTok, such as Snap, Discord, on the dangers that children face on these very platforms. Why now? I mean, I don't understand. These dangers have always been there. These social media platforms claim that they have taken some regulations, but have these regulations actually been implemented? A? And B, these dangers, why in 2023 does the US Congress or the senators realize that there's an actual danger to the teens or to the youth?
Look, Omar, as more and more data comes out, I think it's getting much clearer how much of a damage most of these platforms are causing to young people, specifically because of the lack of their regulation and their own internal policies. Why now? Because now we have more whistleblowers coming out from within the system. This hearing, for instance, was based on the interview and the information leaked by a whistleblower. He also sent an email to Mark Zuckerberg. And some of the data that was presented was harrowing. About 34% of the young women who were less than 17 years of age were subjected to nudity in just 1 week of time. Any parent, you said most of the senators are hostile. Probably I know why they're hostile, because if they're parents and they have young children using platforms like Instagram and they're relying on the protections that most of these platforms claim to provide, then I would as a parent, or you would as a parent, be probably as much hostile as they were. And they were absolutely right in asking the questions, who have you fired? And Mark Zuckerberg could not respond to that. And this public apology, frankly speaking, if it's not accompanied by any concrete actions to provide safety for young people on platforms, I feel it's a sham. Because we've seen this happen over and over again, from all the way to Facebook papers and all the revelations that were made into how Facebook is completely failing in addressing the hate speech, to now the protection of children, which is, I think, very close to the heart of all the parents and everybody in the world who have an ounce of decency probably will have to be worried about on this issue.
How involved is big tech in your point of view as far as online child sexual exploitation crises are concerned? One of the Senator Lindsey Graham, while talking to Mark Zuckerberg, said you have blood on your hands. Is that true? Do you agree with the Senator Lindsey Graham?
Look, to be honest, that's a very loaded statement. What I want to say is that platforms are responsible. Let's just agree on that.
All right.
Platforms are responsible because the kind of power they bear, because the kind of the reach that they have, and they have this power to change people's lives in many ways, and not necessarily in good ways all the time. So they are responsible. And also they're responsible in terms of failing of the systems that they have claimed to deployed over and over again in the past years of how the protections work within these platforms. So I wouldn't probably go as far as saying that Zuckerberg has blood on his hand, but I would definitely say that Facebook and all of the other platforms is responsible. Also, Omar, there's one more very important thing that we need to address here. What are we talking about? We're talking about Meta. What is Meta? Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and now Threads. So there is a lot of this whole power centered into just one company. I feel, frankly speaking, this is too much of a power for one person or a company to hold. And there are precedents, by the way. There are precedents from more than a century ago in the US, where, for instance, what we call the big oil or big petroleum, the companies were broken down into 7 companies, absolutely because of the fact that one company had too much power and they could not, deal with it. So I'm not saying that that's the way to go, but that's obviously a very drastic way of dealing with the centralized power that we have now in the big tech. But there are examples. Number one. Number two, Omar, and this is very important. We as the Pakistani government or the government of the world need to unite on this one idea. Usually what happens is that the governments like Pakistan and a lot of other developing countries try to use the laws and try to use the laws for their own political advantages. Now that I feel is very unfair to the population, because I think regulations are a good opportunity to make some of the big tech big tech platforms accountable. On the other hand, we've seen most of these laws are politically motivated, and they're not perhaps built for the idea of providing protections and so on.
They should be socially motivated.
Exactly.
This is what you feel like. Okay, Mark Zuckerberg tells lawmakers keeping young minds safe online has been a challenge since internet began. And as criminals evolve their tactics, we have to evolve our defenses too. How should we evolve our defenses to protect the Gen Zs, to protect our teenagers, to protect those who are 7 or 8 years old, who have access to a phone that through which they can access X or Meta or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram?
What are our defenses? I know I would like to ask Zuckerberg what are defenses. For instance, my son and my daughter, both of them have an iPad, right? And they use an iPad within the structure, the safety structure provided by Apple that allows me to control and regulate the content that they're using, number one. Number two, they're within that system, they're not allowed to download any apps which is above their age rating. So these are, I suppose, the defense and the protections that Zuckerberg is talking about. Fair enough, I'm very happy with that. But what happens if one of those games that they're trying to download, which apparently says it's for 5 years old, has some content which is on self-harm or any other kind of dangerous content which a child should not be watching?
This is what the dark web
Exactly what I'm saying, right? So this is not a flaw on my end or on the end of the parents who are trying to regulate the content for their children. This is the fault of the big tech organizations, the companies. Now my question is very simple. We need transparency in some of these systems, and they're absolutely unwilling to provide that transparency. We want to know how the systems work.
But why is that? Because they're afraid that part of their methodologies will be unearthed that way?
This is a part of the problem, right? But more importantly, perhaps, and this has been proven over and over again, Omar, that companies only care about what happens to their bottom line. In the end, it's a commercial company. In the end, they're worried about their profits, right? Anything that comes even close to affecting their profits, they wouldn't do that. And this is one of the biggest problems. So the systems that we have in place, Omar, the artificial intelligence systems that we use every day, and you use every day for that matter, we don't know how they work. We don't know what they are. They are completely black box systems, and yet our dependence, our reliance on those systems is momentous, right?
For example, just viral artificial intelligence deep fakes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
That impacts young minds, that impacts teenagers who are inclined politically or socially to some personality or some, whosoever. The impact is very strong on young minds who do not yet know what is right and what is wrong and how to differentiate between the two. What needs to be done? There are different ends. From a parent's point of view, from a societal point of view and from a governmental point of view?
Look, Omar, this is a subject which is very close to my heart, and I'm sure close to the heart of any parent, young person who's raising children with technology. There are a couple of things which should be done. Number one, there has to be education for the young parents who are now letting their children onto the devices, and they're bringing their children within this digital world. They need to understand how parental control works, parental guidance works, and so on. That's number one. That's education. Number two, there has to be transparency within the systems of big tech themselves. They need to come clean with the systems that they're using, how the AI is working, how they're promoting content, what are those parameters that is promoting nudity on the timelines of 17-year-old girls on Instagram. They need to be clear about that, and they also need to be clear about the actions that they've taken to stop such things. You know, one of the senator was asking the question, who have you fired? And that, not necessarily in that way, but we need to know what messed up the system and what have you done to improve it. That's number two. Number three, I feel that the companies have gotten much bigger, much bigger than the governments themselves.
Influential
most of these companies, right? Influential as well. So I was just reading that about 10% of people who use Facebook are Americans, and more than 90% of the resources Facebook has on the protections is going in the US. So only that 10% is being divided into all of the world of the users of the Facebook, which is about 90%. Now, these figures may be closer to the truth and so on, and they might not be exactly accurate. But we know that a massive number of resources Facebook is deploying within the US. So what exactly is happening with the people who are not in the US and so on? So these systems, they need to be transparent. And number three, and which is the most important thing, we as civil society organizations, we as civil society itself, need to push back on the accountability of the big tech companies. We need to make sure that we utilize forums like UN and other international forums which have specifically been developed to make big tech companies accountable.
But my question is, why haven't they been utilized sufficiently till now? Till now, when these senators, ask all these big tech giants to come and explain themselves.
Omar, I think this is a part of that process, right? So some of these questions that they're asking are perhaps the result of the advocacy of national and international players who have been pushing the idea of platform accountability now. You see there is a sudden increase in this, the idea of raising questions around the accountability of platforms. So I think this is a longer term process, and there needs to be a transparency, and this is where the government part comes in. There needs to be a transparency when the government deals with the big tech platform, any of them. We don't know what these deals are, right? We don't know what is being offered and what is being requested. And that's, I think, perhaps one thing that the big tech exploits the most in terms of keeping a lid on their systems and not allowing civil society within their circles. So these are the 4 or 5 major things that I need to be done immediately, probably.
How important, in your point of view, is the role of society, of the family? You are a responsible parent, but there are so many others who are not responsible or do not understand the importance of regulating social media for young minds. Teachers to guide teenagers, because we see many a times in schools and colleges that the young boys and girls have mobile phones with social media platforms active on them, and they use it during the classes and during their breaks as well. Should there be classes to highlight the negative implications of social media?
I think there should be, and probably the term that we should use, and I'm sure you also want to sort of use this term, is probably self-regulation, because regulation is a very different connotation, which kind of state enables and so on.
How can you do self-regulation until you don't yourself know
exactly
what
I'm saying, right?
Wrong?
So, and this is exactly what I'm saying there, wherein the education part comes in. For instance, a lot of parents, you would see, Omar, and next time I'm sure when you see somebody doing that, perhaps you can inform them. Whenever they give their device, their own mobile phone to a child, they're basically completely ruining the idea of parental guidance, because their phone is not regulated in any way or manner for the content that a child should not watch. There's the standard YouTube app, for instance, right? It's not for the children who are under 18. There is a very clear rating on that app. But when I give my phone to a child, essentially what I'm allowing them is all of the content that I have access to, and that's completely I think it's a very dangerous practice, for instance, right? These are the things that the young parents and the guardians need to be educated with. This is what we call digital literacy, by the way. And I think, again, there has to be some form of mass level intervention on this, because otherwise, no matter how many firewalls we erect on the social media, not only that it's going to harm the original and the legitimate expression, but it's also not going to work. We've seen it doesn't work.
Sexual exploitation, bullying, usage of dark web, as you said, you know, for girls and boys under the age of 17. Let's not just talk about girls, it's also boys, and how they are exploited. How can we control this? I know that you said that, you know, most of the resources are used in the US, but what about the developing countries? What about our region? We have heard so many stories, so many horror stories of young boys and girls, impressionable young boys and girls being bullied into.
Some of them who are not with us right now, by the way, some of them who have passed away, and probably because of the dangers of what you're talking about. Yes, so very quickly responding to, and the sad reality is that this is not only happening in the dark web. So this example of what I said about 34% young women less than 17 getting nudity on the content on their timelines, this was Instagram. This was not dark web or something which is hidden away behind a VPN or like a proxy server. This was Instagram that we are talking about, right? So exactly why I'm saying that there needs to be transparency, there needs to be more informed decision making when it comes to the practices of social media companies. Now, Omar, I think I cannot stress on it enough. There has to be a mass level intervention within the Pakistani communities, specifically of the children and the parents who use because everybody is on devices now, even the homeworks are on online platforms now for children, right? So there has to be this intervention of digital literacy and education of how parents and what parents should do in terms of protecting their children from some of this harmful content which is online, right? Number one. Number two, I think this is extremely important that we come together as civil society, as all other players on one platform, and we agree on this point that we have to make big tech accountable, not to increase our own political agendas or content, right, but to genuinely provide protections for the people of Pakistan, because that's
especially
extremely
those who are
necessary.
impressionable.
Yes, yes.
You know, there's another thing that I've seen, and I would call it a negative impact of social media, and that also I blame the big tech for it. Social disregard, lack of respect for elders, polarization. We've seen that creep into Pakistani society. We've seen that creep into other societies as well in developing nations. Doesn't the responsibility of big tech go beyond sexual exploitation or bullying?
Look, a lot of what we are talking about, Omar, is basically the lack of transparency from within their systems. Also, we probably not, this is a slippery slope, okay? So here's the thing, I want to talk about genuine issues, but I also don't want to suspect social media companies and what I feel is probably is wrong in our society and so on. So they're probably not probably not responsible. They do contribute. Their algorithms do contribute. In polarization, for instance, it's they've been playing the algorithms are playing a big role. And so here's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily that the Facebook or any other corporation want it to happen. I'm not saying let's just address this problem with an open heart and open mind and say that probably they don't know how to address it themselves. But then they need to come out clean with it.
Agreed.
And probably say that this is something that we are having we're struggling with, and we need to address this as a community. Unless they do that, I don't think anything is going to work out.
All right, now statistics from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children non-profit group shows financial sextortion, and this is a word I want to use because it's a word we need to remember, in which a predator tricks a minor into sending explicit photos and videos. This is what we began with in our discussion, and this skyrocketed last year. You know, I will come back to Pakistan. We remember so many cases of young boys and girls being lured into sextortion and then their videos being sold online. How important is the implementation of a strong legislation for child safety, and what kinds of legislation would you propose?
I think this is an extremely important question, Omar. Again, very close to my heart. But here's the thing. A legislation probably won't work. And we have enough legislations when it comes to child pornography. PECA has a section on it, and so on and so forth, right? one thing that, and I'm saying legislations won't work because there is a jurisdiction problem. For instance, somebody who's extorting you or sextorting you might not be in Pakistan. How do you deal with that, right? They might be in a country where we don't have a mutual legal agreement of assistance with them, right? How do we deal with that? So this is more complicated than just having a law. The first thing we need to do, and this is again extremely important, we need to remove that barrier between the parents and children. When the children don't tell their parents the first thing that they've done a mistake, and this is happening now. Most of the children I've seen, most of the young people I've seen who are dealing with this problem, they're unable to talk to their parents. And then there resorts to things like self-harm and so on. And most of them are, because of this acts, because of this background, they're also subjected to even more sexual violence, merely because of the fact they can't talk to their guardians. And this barrier needs to be removed first off. They need to be able to talk to their guardians. They need to be able to talk to their parents very openly about, they've made a mistake, what has happened, and so on, and how to address it. This societal problem needs to go away.
I think that is primordial, and then the other things will follow suit. Thank you so very much, Asad Baig, to have joined us, because I felt this was something that is very close to your heart, and this is something that you could explain in a much better fashion than so many others. And this is also something that we need to understand as a society in a developing country such as Pakistan. We also see that in India, we also see that in Bangladesh and in so many other developing countries as well. But as you said, we need to come as one to address issues such as these. Thank you so very much to have joined us on this. Let's come to our last two stories very, very quickly. The first concerns the ICJ that has dismissed much of Ukraine's case against Russia. Judges at the ICJ have found that Russia violated elements of a UN anti-terrorism treaty, but they declined to rule on allegations that were brought by Kiev that Moscow was responsible for the shooting down of the Malaysian Airlines MH17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014. Ukraine had filed a lawsuit at the ICJ, also known as the World Court, in 2017, accusing Russia of violating the anti-terrorism treaty by funding pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. Now, in the hearing at the court at The Hague last June, Russia had dismissed Ukraine's allegations that it funded and controlled pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, and now the ICJ is more or less sided with the Russian point of view. Finally, let's end on a positive note, or an artistic note on that, and that concerns a painting by the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt that was believed to have been lost for 100 years has now finally been found in Vienna. The portrait of Fraulein Eliza once belonged to a Jewish family in Austria and was last seen in public in the year 1925. We don't know what happened, but the family of the current owners have had the painting since the 1960s. It is valued at more than $55 million US. A lot of people call this rediscovery as a sensation. This portrait will now be put for auction on the 24th of April on behalf of the owners, and of course all of this is based on the Washington Principles and International Agreement to return Nazi looted art to the descendants of the people they were taken from. So, art, as we say, is never lost. It's always there to be rediscovered. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end for today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.